Hello, salut, buongiorno, and welcome to another episode of the Traveler's Haven podcast series, where we will be looking at all things true travel professionals need and need to hear. I'm your host, Sam, and once again, we are back with another travel nurse interview. Last time, we had Nurse Kiera, who walked us through not just being a travel nurse, but also a content creator. This time, we are joined by a travel nurse who has been to more places than you might think and does U.S. travel nursing as a Canadian nurse. The one and only Nurse Olga.
Hi, Sam. Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for coming on. I have a couple questions set up for you. We'll just run through and take as much time as you want to answer them.
Perfect. Well, do.
All right. My first question, and you have to have seen this coming. You've done quite a bit of travel nursing across a number of places, and I wanted to start by talking about your very first journey in Melbourne, Australia. That is a very interesting place to do travel nursing. So I just want to know, what was it like? How did you end up in Australia?
That's a really good question. So, first of all, that happened, it feels like forever ago. That was back in 2013. So, it feels like a lifetime ago. I was a brand new nurse, only 2 years out of nursing school. And, sometimes you're young enough and you don't think things through and you just do them. And then later in life, you look back and you think, oh my gosh, did I really do that? That Australia contract was exactly that for me. I mean, if I had known what I know now, I don't think I would have done it, but it built character, as they say. And it was very transformative. 6 months for me. Definitely grew a lot as a person, as a nurse during that time. But a friend of mine and a coworker of mine, that was her idea. She wanted to go really badly. I decided to come with her, and due to life circumstances, she wasn't able to go after all. So I found myself to be alone in Australia for 6 months, doing med surg nursing. And it was difficult for obvious reasons. I was alone, very far away from home. First time traveling, knowing nothing how travel nursing works. So I had to figure all of that out, the visas, the registration process. So it was definitely a steep learning curve, but over that 6 months, it gave me courage to try it again later on in life. And obviously I've done that many times since. And it was definitely interesting. I was able to learn different ways that nursing, like a different nursing in Australia than here. And like the major one being nurses in Australia, I found to just have a different scope of practice than nurses in North America. And I had to learn that very quickly. I love my time there, but I found to be I had a little bit less autonomy than I do have here. So I had to learn really quickly how to act, what I could do, what I could not do, and then lean on the experience of my charge nurses at the time to guide me through. Mhm.
What were some of the things that, you could do that you couldn't do? What were the things that were really like strange to try and get accustomed to procedure wise?
Oh, okay. So nitty-gritty. Okay. Like the specifics I remember, and again, keep in mind this was like 15 years ago, but the specifics were for whatever reason at that time, maybe that's changed since, but at that time I could not, as an RN, place IVs in patients. So if my patient lost an intravenous access, I had to call a physician or a resident to come up and do that for me. Even though I had the skill, I had the knowledge how to do it. I practiced doing that here every day. So that was I got a little bit of trouble for that because I assumed I could do it. So I gathered all of my things. I went to get in the IV in, and then I was stopped by my charge nurse, and she said, no, you can't do that by yourself unless you were given a specific order by the physician. You can't do it. So that was interesting. Another specific thing was narcotics. I had to co-sign absolutely everything with another RN to take narcotics out and waste. Here in Canada and in the States, obviously, wasting narcotics, you have to co-sign with another RN. That's obvious. But taking them out, you don't. And so I it, it slowed me down quite a bit over there. I remember being frustrated because half of my shift I was looking for another nurse to take some drugs out for my patients who's post-op and in pain, and the other half of my shift I was running around co-signing drugs for other people. So that was different. I mean, I understand the logic behind it perhaps, but it definitely slowed me down. And again, I didn't know that going into it. I just learned on the job.
And what about the actual, like, Australia, the place? Me personally, Australia, big no for me. Spiders, no, 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 no. Bugs, spiders are the big one. But I mean, being there must have been very nice, location wise. But obviously, you didn't know anyone, and I'm sure it was a different landscape to try and get accustomed to as well.
Yeah, and that brings me back to my original point. You don't know what you don't know. And at that time, I didn't know that Australia was famous. I don't know why I didn't know this. I was in my early 20s. I just went for it. To me, it sounded like an adventure. It sounded fun. It sounded exotic and far away. So I went for it. And to your point, I did land and learned, oh, wow, there are a lot of things that are not pleasant to me, like spiders and snakes, all of the things that try to kill you, as they say. But Australia was fun. I mean, it's just so different from what I'm used to here in Vancouver on the West Coast. And I've never seen landscape like it again. I was in Melbourne. That was a big city, very vibrant. It actually reminded me of Vancouver a lot, my hometown. So that gave me some comfort. But of course, I traveled through Australia a little bit while I was there, and I did see all the wildlife and the kangaroos and the koalas and all of that. And um, like so unique, so such beautiful memories. Definitely met a few spiders that I was told were harmless. They're called huntsman spiders. They are massive. They live indoors. They are harmless to people, but they don't look it. Saw some huge bats, also had to fight those.
My
So I think it's worth a visit. I don't know if you need to stay there for 6 months. If you don't work there, it can be overwhelming. But I'm so glad I went and saw it with my own eyes. It's beautiful. Some of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen were in Australia.
Oh yeah. No, I could absolutely. I can honestly, I can't even imagine. I'm sure they were incredible, really.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm actually going to backtrack just a second to the procedures. I want to know about the licensing process for that assignment because I know that it's sometimes difficult, even just in Canada, province to province, and Canadian to U.S. is its own different ballpark. But Canadian to Australian, that must have been a very, I don't know, was it difficult? Was there a lot of steps? I actually am not even sure where to even start.
Yeah, and neither did I. So back in 2013 when well, it took me a year to get everything. So my journey, my paperwork journey with Australia started even before then. And I remember I had to mail everything, physically mail things, and then they would have questions. They will mail me back. I would get some emails, but it was a lot of just red tape, bureaucracy, paper here, paper there. They have questions, a lot of delays. And it did take a long time. Now, having said that, um, I was also not in a huge rush to make it happen soon. So when I, if like had a little bit of a hiccup, I took my time resolving it. I wasn't express shipping things. I wasn't paying for, express mail. I wasn't calling and following up every 2 days like I have done in the States sometimes. So at that time, it did take a little bit over a year. Probably could have been done faster, but I wasn't really rushing the process. But since then, I actually just had a phone call with an Australian recruiter earlier this week, and I asked her, "Hey, this was my experience, 15 years ago or whatever. Have things changed since then?" And she said they had, for whatever reason, they had a huge backlog this year, but now they're starting to get through it. So she says almost everything is now online for international nurses as well. And of course, with the passage of time, things are a lot more accessible online. People are talking online. We have, Facebook groups and Reddit, of course, and you can get a lot of information from other nurses trying to go through that process. Now, I do know still to this day that travel nursing for Canadian nurses um, is more common and the information is more abundant into the States than it is to Australia. So even still, so many years later, I tried to look up a couple of things, and I had a little bit of hard time with the logistics of it. So it's possible, obviously. I went on something that's called a working visa. It's still in effect. My recruiter from the other day confirmed it. It's a visa that you're allowed to go to Australia for 1 year and choose to work if you'd like. And if you're 35 years or younger, you're eligible for this visa, and it's a once in a lifetime visa. That is the visa that I used to go there. So if I were to go back again, I could not use the same visa. I had to do something different. So with that working visa, it's like not like a fast track, but it's a much easier process to get into Australia as a travel nurse. So if you are 35 years old or younger and you're looking into nursing in Australia, that's definitely the best way for you to do it.
Okay. And I mean, that does lead me naturally into the next question, which is, would you do it again? And especially without the visa, I mean, it would end up being more difficult.
Yes, exactly. So that was the point of my conversation with this recruiter. It did turn out that my visa process will be a little bit more challenging, which has never really scared me enough before because I've gone through so many visa processes. But what really was my decision maker was I have specialized since my last time there. I've specialized into cardiac cath lab nursing and interventional radiology nursing, and that's the field that I've been in for the last almost a decade. And that's where I'm most used to. That's what I'm most confident and comfortable with. And that's what I do. That's where I go to the States. I travel with cath lab nursing. And so for me to go somewhere brand new and go back to bedside, that's no longer where I am in life. So I wouldn't do that for bedside nursing. And so I asked if travel nursing, specifically with cath lab or procedural departments, is a thing in Australia. And even though it is, it's very limited. Contracts come up very once in a while and in a very few facilities. And that made me think, is this whole process of getting the visa and getting re-registered with Australian Board of Nursing, is it worth it if I don't have guaranteed work? And that's a very, very far journey to the unknown
Hmm.
for what if I don't have a guarantee of work. And so I think I haven't decided 100% yet. I'm still looking to see if somebody can give me different information, but it kind of all signs pointing to that. Australian travel nursing is available for OR nurses, for emergency nursing, labor and delivery, for med surg, of course. But once you start specializing into a little bit more niche areas, it becomes just rare for travel nurses. There's such thing as agency nursing, which is not the same thing as travel nursing. Travel nursing in Australia means it's 4 to 6 to 12 weeks, whatever the length is, and they pay for your accommodation, they pay for your flight, they pay for everything. You show up and you have a schedule. That's travel nursing. Versus agency nursing, it's kind of like per diem shifts. If a hospital needs you, they'll call an agency and they say, oh yeah, I have a nurse, here you go, here's your shift. But that's not guaranteed, and they don't pay for your housing or flights. So all of a sudden, you're responsible for covering all of your expenses with no guarantee that you have a job. And that's just not something that is worth it for me at this point in time.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good point. And it is strange to me because I think normally having the specialization actually makes it easier to be a travel nurse. But I guess, I mean, it does kind of make sense because, you have to go so far. They probably want to just do broad strokes, I guess. But it is weird to see how it's sort of like the other way.
Yeah, exactly. And I found it the same thing to be with Canada. Canada does not have a very robust travel nursing program, comparative to the States, of course. We do have a little bit of travel nursing, again, with very similar, in that sense, Canada is very similar to Australia. So you can find travel contracts with ED, maybe dialysis. I've seen a couple of those, med surge, etc. But procedural like cardiac and interventional radiology that practically does not exist in Canada. Ironically, we do have my home hospital right now has a travel nurse, but that's literally the first one ever, and that not a thing. It's like a unicorn thing. And so you kind of, for me, and this is what I would suggest for anybody interested in travel nursing with specialties, before you jump in and start paying all this money for registration and licensure and everything, see if there's an abundance of your work, because you would think that the more specialized you are, the more wanted you are, but at the same time, that's not the reality. And as I'm learning, and I've learned over these years, places like Canada and Australia, they just do very general nursing, but they don't have a lot of specialized nursing. Now in United States, that's a very different ballgame. That's a whole different universe, and they have a ton of travel assignments specifically for these niche little, you know, departments. And in fact, I just got a phone call at a voice message from a recruiter from the States. And she said, if you're looking for a contract, I have a ton. In fact, I have 200 cath lab specific contracts all across the country. Call me, let me know. So not only is it abundant, they're also actively seeking out people to sign on with them. So very different situation.
So I wanted to ask now, moving from Australia, about your travel nursing in the US. And as a Canadian nurse, I'm sure it's a little bit more difficult than if it was just US travel nursing, or if you're a Canadian nurse travel nursing in Canada. So just walk me through sort of the process. Obviously, not as complicated as Australia, but I'm sure it still has its hills to climb.
Yes, many, many hills, but they're all worth it in my experience. So, with the states, the first thing you do is you need to get two pieces of paper, like two documents. One is called a visa screen, and the other one is called this CES report. It's an education report. And those pieces are coming from a third party that almost every state in the States is partnered with. It used to be called CGFNS, very like wordy name. And I'm pretty sure they just renamed it to something else. I can't remember off the top of my head what they just renamed it to. But if you type in Google CGFNS, it will automatically send you to the new name. And so this third party, their job is to receive all of your information. So all of your credentials, your education credentials, your history, your degrees, your transcripts, your experience, all of that. They take all of that and then they start going through it and they start seeing if your credentials equate to American credentials. So at the end, and Canadian nurses, if you've graduated from a Canadian university, it'll be fine. So you've wrote your NCLEX, you've sent all of your paperwork. At the end, they will say, "Yep, you've passed. Here's your paper. Here's your report." And the other one, the visa screen, it's literally the same information. You send it out. Usually you just need to send one copy if you're ordering both, one copy, and then they will use that same one copy of documents, and then they will issue the visa screen and the CES. And the visa screen is important for when you cross the border to get your actual working visa. So it has nothing to do with getting a license. It's everything to do with getting your visa. This is for the border control. Before you decide to go into all of that trouble, it's extremely important for you to understand which state requires a social security number on hand. Because most states, I don't have the exact amount, but like 40 plus states out of 50. So now that the window's shrinking, they're requiring to have a social security number, which is equivalent to our social insurance number, on hand before you apply for their license, for the registered nurse license of that state. And every state, you have to have a license in every single state if you live in Canada. So if that is the case, for example, let's take Hawaii, right? One of the states that I've worked in before. If you you've never worked in the States and you decide to apply for Hawaii, you will not get that license off the bat. They will say, where's your SSN? Show us the SSN. You said, I don't have it. And then they're like, well, come back when you do. So therefore, all of that money goes wasted. So don't do that. Instead, you need to apply and get your first job with a few states that still allow you to get the license and a job without having that social security number on hand. They will give you the license. You have to get, as soon as you have the job, you cross into the States, you have to apply for that social security number. It takes about 2 weeks. Once you have that social security number, you give it to your employer, they're happy, and now you have this coveted social security number that you can apply to literally anywhere else in the future. So that is probably the most confusing and expensive lesson that I've learned, because I applied to Hawaii first. I did not get that license for the above reasons. It was very frustrating and so confusing to me. I did not understand what was going on. And at that time, that was in 2015, so about a decade ago, my recruiter at the time said, let's try Texas. Right now, Texas has a lot, well, at that time, Texas has a lot of positions. They don't require social security number. Let's just apply with them. I did. They gave me the job. I flew in, I got my social security number. And then later I went back to Hawaii and I said, okay, let's try this again. I have the number now. And then that's how I got my Hawaii licensure.
Okay. And so how many places have you done travel nursing in the US for?
States wise, it was I've done Texas, Washington State, Hawaii. That is all that I've completed, and I've been to Washington multiple times. I just got my New York license while I was there on the contract this year, and I got my Oregon license. So those are my next two untouched licenses, and hopefully next year I will be able to go to one of them or back to Hawaii. That could be an option as well.
Why did you, sounds like you really liked Hawaii, right?
Well, I love Hawaii for obvious reasons. It's a very special place in my heart. I've been there many times. That's where I got married. It's very sweet. For me, it's like a very special place for me. Funnily enough, I didn't have the best experience working there. However, that was just one facility, and this is a very prevalent situation in nursing and travel nursing in the States, that I don't want people to have these, look at this with these rose-colored glasses, that this is all, rainbows and butterflies. It can come, this whole career choice comes with some setbacks and some unpleasant moments. Some units will not be traveler friendly. And that's what I found to be my experience in that one facility in Hawaii. Having said that, it's very unfair to just cross off an entire state because you had bad experience one time in one facility with one department. So I'm definitely willing to give Hawaii another go. It will be on a different island with a different set of people and different facilities. So yeah, I'm definitely willing to give it another try. But to be very honest and transparent, some of your contracts will be fun and totally exciting, and some will not. And you don't know which one that you will get until you start working it. That's the unfortunate truth.
So you had trouble with the staff themselves. Could you talk a little bit about that? If you don't want to, that's fine. I just, I think that's interesting because most of the time you hear people have issues with like the agency they work for or like accommodations, stuff like that. But the staff themselves, I mean, I guess, it's to be expected, but I'm still a little bit surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. To be fair, my agency, my last two agents, my recruiters have been wonderful. I'm happy to recommend them. If somebody who's interested wants to contact me directly, I'm more than happy to send my people's information to them. They were wonderful, and they were there. They held my hand the entire time. I had zero issues with them. No issues with payroll. No issues with communication. It was great. The issues that I did have in Hawaii was, I think it's hard for me to speak on their behalf because I'm not staff. But there is something to be said about travel nurses coming into your department. And usually the contracts are 3 months long. So they're very short in the grand scheme of things. So they come in, they don't know where things live. They don't know the protocols. Staff needs to orientate this brand new people. They don't trust them because they don't know them. By the time they kind of get them up on their feet, and, all the while knowing that they're getting paid a lot more than these staff, the regular staff. And then by the time they're kind of, on their own and functioning and not asking questions anymore, it's time for them to leave. And then they get maybe a week of a break, and then they get new set of travelers. And so I understand to a degree why that could be exhausting, why it could take a toll. However, I've been to contracts where, despite that culture, the staff knew that travelers are there to help, because otherwise they would be so short. And so, despite it's exhausting, and I get it, it's not ideal, but they were nice, they were welcoming, they were helpful. I think I just got a little bit of a tricky unit where it wasn't as people were just maybe burnt out, and then they just didn't have it in them to be nice. And facilities have that reputation. It's very sad. I don't think that should be the case, but there is a little part of me that, on a human level, understands how that could be, given the fact that I train a lot of people, new nurses, new cath lab nurses in my home hospital. I understand how that education fatigue can happen, for sure.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But it is a little bit unfortunate because I do think travel nurses serve like such a vital role in helping, like, what is the fundamental issue in healthcare, which is, understaffed. We need more people in healthcare because we need just more people in the field, always, always, always. So having people come from elsewhere to help is like actually such a good solution to the problem. It's just tough that, you know, you go there, and then on top of having to learn everything and having to like fit in and not know anyone, then sometimes you also get that sort of resentment that comes at you. And I mean, I personally don't think that resentment is from a good place. I can understand it, but I feel like at some point, it it's tough because nursing is such a difficult and uh stressful field that I can understand the resentment. But I do think that travel nurses, it's huge and it should be respected. And hopefully in the future, people don't really feel that way. So yeah, that's my take on it.
And to be fair, for the most part, I've had no issues. I just completed a contract in Washington where my staff there was wonderful. To me, they were so kind. They were so patient. They answered everything. They helped me learn so many new skills, the skills that I did not bring to the table. And I have a lot of experience in this field. And I came in and I go, oh my gosh, I've never done this before. I'm terrified. And they're like, it's okay. We'll teach you how to do it. And they walked me through it. And it was my birthday while I was there, and they threw me this huge birthday party, something that I could not have possibly expected. And there was just so much kindness. So I don't want to scare people to be like, ooh, don't go to the States because some nurses out there hate travelers. Yes, that is true. But also, for every nurse like that, there is abundant number of nurses and, techs and different staff members who are actually quite lovely people. And that is just the reason I brought it up, is just to be transparent, that it's not all, great and smooth sailing. Sometimes that's just the reality of nursing anywhere.
No, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, it just comes with working with others, right? Having to compromise and get along. And I mean, that's how it is, especially on a stressful job. It just makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So I did want to just quickly ask, you've done travel nursing, obviously, United States, Australia. Have you done travel nursing in Canada? And if you haven't, have you done nursing in Canada? Because I would assume you've done nursing in Canada, but I'm not quite sure if you've done travel nursing in it.
Yeah, I've done both. I am based out of Vancouver since 2011. So I love my hospital. It will always be my home hospital. And when I go travel, wherever I go, I come back as a casual. I have been a casual for the last couple of years, and that really allows me that flexibility to come and go as I need. Of course, I need to commit to a minimum amount of hours per year to keep my casual status at home, which is no problem. I get that because I only do one contract away a year. So that gives me plenty of time to make up these hours. But in terms of travel nursing in Canada, I've done only one contract. It was here in BC, so I didn't go very far. It was on the Sunshine Coast, and it was a 3-month contract, which important to say that is the time frame that I gave the agency. So that is a one big difference between travel nursing in Canada and the States. In the States, the facility tells you how long the contract is, and it's almost always 13 weeks. It's a quarter of a year. So standard contract, you can find shorter contracts or longer, you can extend, you can kind of adjust, but on its face value, almost all contracts you will come across will be a 13 weekers. Here in Canada, it's more like I called my recruiter and she said, "How long would you like to have this contract?" So now it's on me, the traveler, to tell them, "Oh, I can come in for 5 weeks, whatever." So I didn't know. So I said 13 weeks because that's what I'm used to. And she was so surprised. She said, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." Yeah. And then I go, "Whoa, whoa, wait a second. Why are you so surprised? Should it be shorter?" And she said, "No, but for the most part, contracts in Canada are shorter." And I've noticed that myself personally when I was doing this BC contract, the travel nurses coming in through the hospital, they were going as little as 2 weeks, which I think is dangerous. And I don't think it's effective because it takes about a week for you to get oriented, get your feet wet, understand what's going on, and you're there for another week and then you're gone. And so, I can actually argue that that would be far more frustrating to me as a staff nurse to see all of these new faces rotating every 2 to 3 weeks. Um, of course, I've heard of travel nurses in Canada that do 5 weekers, that do 8 weekers. It's really up to them, which is very interesting. But I think I like that a lot because it gives you as a traveler a lot more power and a lot more flexibility. However, not to say that 13 weeks is a huge amount of time. It's 3 months essentially. It's a little bit over 3 months. Even if the contract is not ideal, it is still just a season. You go, you do your job, and then you leave. And so I feel like anything over 3 months becomes a little bit more of a commitment. Like my Australia contract was 6 months. It's kind of like, oh gosh, like I'm really into this. But because Australia is so far, I had to, it's like, it's worth it because I'm going so far, might as well stay there for 6 months.
Mhm.
But here locally in the States and in Canada, anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months is probably the average amount of time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that is, wow, I did not know that. So it does give you a greater degree of flexibility for sure.
Yep. Yeah.
And that kind of leads naturally. I'll just expand the question a little bit outwards. Do you prefer one over the other, or is it just aspects like that you like this of Canadian travel nursing, but this of American but or is there like a definitive? You're like, no, 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 this one.
I mean, the one thing I don't like about Canadian nursing is it's not as well developed as American. So we don't have a lot of agencies. And not having a lot of agencies pose two problems for me. One, there's not a lot of jobs. And so there's not a lot to choose from. And like we were saying before, the more niche you are, the less options you have. In fact, I just emailed my Canadian recruiter from when I did my contract, and she said, I have no travel nursing contracts for my field. So I actually have no options unless I want to do something more general. And the second issue that Canadian nursing poses for me is that because there are very few contracts and agency, there is not a lot of competition. They kind of monopolize the market. And so that becomes important during negotiation section or part of securing a contract. In the States, what I usually do, I find a facility, I find a contract I like that's interesting to me. It's a facility I'm comfortable with. It's where I'm licensed. I like the pay. We're good to go. But then the same contract is being offered by multiple agencies. So facility says, hey, we need a nurse. Here's what we're willing to pay, go for it. And all of these agencies start trying to pull their nurses and say, do you want this contract? So, but they're all fighting for the same one contract. And so when I go to the States, I look at two or three different agencies offering the same contract in the same facility. And I can say, okay, well, this one's paying more. Can you match that? And they will say, okay, fine, we'll match it. Or this one has better, whatever, conditions. Can you do that? And so you can kind of pin them against each other a little bit so that you get the best outcome. Versus in Canada, it's just one agency that could offer you this one contract. You like it, take it. You don't like it, leave it. They have all these other travel nurses fighting for it. So all of a sudden, you don't have the same level of power and negotiation leverage. And so in BC specifically, I tried to negotiate so badly for my pay raise, and they were not having it. They basically said it's a flat rate. It's $55 for per hour, and if you have more than whatever amount of experience, like years of experience, they'll pay additional $3 as an experience pay. So that's $58. That was the case in 2021 when I went, and I just met a travel nurse here in BC, and she said she's literally being paid the same. So it's been all of these 4 years later, and then they have not adjusted it. That to me is criminal, because in the last 4 years, we have, seen such a huge rise in cost of living, especially in BC and Vancouver. And so to be paying the same amount than you were paying 4 years ago, to me, that's just crazy. So to answer, sorry, this was a little bit long-winded, but to answer your question, what is I do appreciate American travel nursing, because it's just a more robust, more abundant system. You can do a lot more with it. There's more work, there's more agencies, you can negotiate. If something doesn't work out, you can have a next contract literally tomorrow with somebody else. In Canada, is just, unless you are working for emergency department or med surge, maybe OR, you're kind of limited to those to those departments. And if you're looking into East Coast, like New Brunswick or Newfoundland, a lot of the times they require you to be bilingual in French and English, which I wish I was, but I'm not. Not, at least not at the level where I can communicate or get consent or explain to the patient the procedure. So right away, all of those contracts are even not a possibility for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I want to ask a similar question, hopefully not controversial. So obviously, you prefer United States travel nursing, but what about the people and like the culture and just sort of the vibe of it all? Do you prefer that as well, or do you? I mean, born and raised Canada, so I mean, maybe you're more familiar with Canadian than you are United States, but maybe at this point, you've done so many contracts that maybe that's not completely true. So, do you have a preference for, I don't want to say the people, but maybe
Mhm.
for the attitudes?
Mhm. The biggest difference I found was in the States, so in Canada, travel nurses are seen a little bit like a celebrity. You walk into the unit and it's like, oh my gosh, you're travelers. Where are you from? Da, da, da. It's just like, it's not a very common thing. And so, for the most, I mean, obviously we have travel nurses, but it's not like an abundant thing in every hospital. Every unit has travel nurse. So when travel nursing here, people, it's more of unique career choice, unique position. And so you do get a lot of questions, you do get a lot of attention, um mostly good, I would imagine. But in the States, it's such a common thing. It's like, just because you're a travel nurse means nothing. Like, I worked with 6 7 travel nurses on the same unit. Like, that is, you're just one of them, it's fine. So people are more chill in the States about you being a travel nurse. They're fine with it. They have systems already on their unit, like, okay, travel nurses do this and then staff does this. It's like, it's normal. It's part of, you just flow into the system and you exist in that system. Versus here in Canada, it's a little bit more, you have to kind of learn where you fit. In terms of people, like everywhere else, people, you can find good and bad in every country. I hear stupid jokes in the States about me being Canadian. I hear stupid jokes here in Canada about whatever. So it's really, I wouldn't say people are the factor that I would automatically discount going there or staying here necessarily. In terms of culture, medical culture, pretty similar. Depends on the unit, of course. In my unit, in procedural nursing, it's very similar. You have a physician, you have techs, and you have nurses, and you work as a team. It's very dependent facility to facility. And of course, much like Australia, anytime, well, anywhere really, anytime you leave your home country with your familiar drugs and names for things and equipment, you kind of have to learn the local language. In Australia, they use paracetamol instead of acetaminophen. Same thing, but they don't use acetaminophen. That's not a thing. Tylenol is not a thing. So you kind of have to learn, okay, forget that word. When I want to say that, I'm going to say paracetamol because that's what they use. In the States, they don't use gravel. They don't know what gravel is, right? They use Dramamine. So if I want to say I'm going to give you something for nausea, and if I tell you I'm going to give you gravel, they're going to be so confused. Why are you giving me gravel? Gravel is not a thing. So same thing with blood work. You have to learn, different temperature. You have to learn different units. And it's just a testament that you have to be flexible and you have to be open-minded, and you have to understand that just because you know how to do something at home, that's a copy and paste to everywhere else you go. You will be met with different protocols, with different order sets, cultures, names, drugs, all of the things. So my advice to anybody who wants to go into travel nursing in the States or anywhere else, make sure you have a very solid base of knowledge in whatever field you're in here locally. And then when you go to somewhere new, make sure that you know your basics, but be open to learning that place's culture and everything, medical culture and everything that comes with it. Don't ever say, well, I'm not going to do that because at home, blah, 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 blah. It's irrelevant. Obviously some things are universal, but for the most part, you need to be open, and you need to be friendly, and you need to ask your questions. And if you kind of come in with that attitude, for the most part, working elsewhere culture wise is not going to be an issue. And by the way, this is me speaking purely from, English speaking countries. I cannot say the same for nurses who work in the Middle East. I know that there are some special complications or maybe special considerations that nurses have to take. I don't know those things. This is me purely speaking for the States, Canada, and Australia.
Okay. Yeah. So aside from the travel nursing culture itself and the people and all that, I have just one more question, and it's the same one that I think every travel nurse probably has to ask themselves at some point, where it's, how do you balance exploring the place while still maintaining your work life routine, being away from people that you know, how it all ties together. How do you just go about it and keep yourself not just calm and collected under it, but like enjoying your time and making sure that it's all like worth it in the end?
hmm that is a very good question because sometimes it's hard to find that balance. It depends on your schedule. It's very rare for travel nurses to be able to create their own schedule. Usually, once you sign the contract, the your manager will tell you what you're working for the next 3 months. And with any luck, you're gonna have enough time off for you to explore the city or the town you're in. I've been lucky enough to see almost every town where I've stayed for contract. I've had enough time over the 3 months to kind of explore it. Um, it's just, for me personally, I tell myself it's 3 months. I don't dwell on it. I just know that it's a season. I'm there to work. And then when I have time off, I try to get out and explore because I know that even though I miss my family, I miss my friends, I'll be back home in 3 months tops, right? And if you're in Canada, it's going to be shorter than that. So I try to make the most out of it when I'm away because I know once I'm home, I will be like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. And I learned that actually from Australia. When I was in Australia, I was in Melbourne and I did not go see the Great Ocean Road, which is like literally right there. And I couldn't tell you why I didn't. I just didn't do it. And now all these years later, I look back and I go, "Oh my gosh, you were there for 6 months. You did not get to see the most iconic thing that's in that area. Why wouldn't you do that? Why don't you go to Tasmania? Why wouldn't you go to all these other places like that way right there?" And I think that was the lesson, that I've learned because ever since then, of course, when you go travel nursing, you try to focus on work, of course, that's your number one priority. But in between, I also know that I miss my family. I miss my coworkers here, but I'm going to be back so soon. So I might as well just enjoy where I am, take a lot of pictures, take a lot of videos because I know soon enough I will be looking back and then I will have those things to kind of remember my time there. Um and so this last contract, I was in Washington, about around Seattle area, but my friend and I decided to go down to Oregon on my days off, and we spent the best time in Oregon. It was so fun, and we went to Hood River. We saw these beautiful mountains and waterfalls, and it was just so magical. And when you get these little trips out, you come back and you're like invigorated. You're like, okay, it gives you a little bit of breath of fresh air, you get a little bit of socialization, you get to see new places. So it's hard to balance, but you have to have a little bit of both. You need to have work and you need to have a little play. And when you get sad and homesick, you just need to remember that you'll be home soon enough. It's just enjoy it while you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect. Okay. And with that, well, I think we'll end things off. I really appreciate you coming on, obviously, and just sharing everything. I think you brought up some amazing things, and hopefully, the people that watch this, they take something important away from it because I really do think that there's some good uh, lessons to be learned here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have shared. And if anybody watching this wants to connect with me or have any questions, specific questions, I'm more than happy to provide answers if I can.
Okay, yeah, and out of curiosity, just where could they reach you? If any of my viewers want to reach out, ask you questions, or maybe just see your own content, where should they head off to?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Instagram. I'm at Cross Border RN. That's where I post mostly travel nursing things, but also some lifestyle things. And because I'm a cath lab nurse, I do post some cardiac content for those who are interested. You can DM me, you can message me there. And I have a guide, a Canadian travel nurse guide into the US. That's in my bio. So you are welcome to grab a copy of that. And it just goes over the process from when you're wondering if you should even do travel nursing in the States to signing your first contract and going into your first shift. It goes over everything. It's about 43 pages of really good information. It's lessons I've learned over the last 13 years of doing this job and things that I could not find online in one package. I put it all together, and it's yours if you'd like to use it.
Hey, that's great. And as always, it'll be in the description, linked there. So go check it out and show your support. Follow, buy. Every episode, I always say that I say it every episode too, but every time I want to say it, go show support, follow, do everything. Just don't hear this and don't do it. Follow, subscribe, support, everything. Just show your support to people that matter and do good work like Olga here. So do it, please. Anyone watching, go do it right now. And awesome interview. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And well, I've been Sam. This has been Traveler's Haven, and I wish you safe travels.